Hello and welcome to Real Cheating Story. It was dark, rainy, and cold here in New York City, and I hated it. I had been living in Honolulu for the last 8 years, enjoying the beautiful weather. Now, I found myself in the back seat of a dirty taxi, making my way from Kennedy Airport to a hotel in Midtown. But what the hell, it was only for 2 weeks, and then I could return to paradise. I could put up with almost anything for a couple of weeks. My publisher had ordered me to attend an awards ceremony and receive my acclaim. You see, I'm a 58-year-old writer, and my third book had topped the bestseller list for the year. It sold an impressive number of copies and was made into a movie that won an Academy Award. As the old saying goes, my luck was good. I had signed a 5-book deal for an advance of about $3 million, with the movie rights selling for even more, including a percentage of the box office. I was rolling in clover, definitely a happy camper and in pretty good shape. I hadn't broken any mirrors lately, and while I always said looks weren't everything, it didn't hurt to be considered ruggedly handsome at 6 feet 2 inches, or so my PR lady said. My agent and publisher wanted me to attend the awards event, do a few book signings, and make the rounds of morning television shows. The publicity would help boost book sales, and I got a piece of those sales. Even better, my publisher was covering all my expenses. All it would cost me was a few weeks in this dreadful weather. It was March, and everyone knows that March isn't the best time to visit NYC. For the record, I write under the name Mindy Feisers, but my real name is Jack Harris. I was lost deep in thought about my next book when the cab slammed on the brakes. Anyone who has taken a cab in NYC knows to expect being jolted across the seat as your driver and another cab try to occupy the same space at the same time. This time, there was a thud, and my driver started yelling, presumably swearing in his native Middle Eastern language. He hopped out of the cab while I struggled to regain my composure on the seat. I looked around for the other cab but found none. Instead, I saw my driver huddled over a figure lying in a puddle of rain and slush by the curb. He had hit a pedestrian. A cop rushed across the street, talking into his radio, while I got out of the cab to see what had happened. The pedestrian was a homeless person, one of NYC's many faceless individuals. The cop was administering first aid until the ambulance arrived, while the driver kept yelling about his cab. Feeling helpless, I noticed the vagrant's possessions scattered on the pavement, having fallen from an overturned shopping cart. Maybe it was the nice guy in me, or perhaps just a desire to keep warm, but I started picking up the items. One of the first responders approached me, handing me a pair of rubber gloves and warning me to be careful. As I rummaged through the belongings, I spotted a framed picture that caught my attention. It was a photograph from about 10 years ago, featuring me smiling with my now ex-wife. I couldn't see the face of the homeless person, but the body appeared female. The ambulance arrived and quickly took her away. The cops began collecting the belongings and tossing them to the curb, one of them mentioning the need to find identification. "I think I know her," I offered. "She might be my ex." The cop and I moved to the back seat of the police car to fill out paperwork. We had been divorced for about 10 years, and the last I had seen her was in Rochester, New York, leaving the courthouse after our divorce was granted. She had requested the divorce, not because of infidelity, but due to her struggles with alcoholism. After almost 30 minutes of questioning, I finished with the police only to find the cab gone, replaced by a limo. Someone must have realized who I was, deciding that riding in a cab wasn't fitting for a famous author. I guessed my publisher had been notified. I wanted to sneak into town anonymously, avoiding all the reporters and TV news crews vying for the best picture or question. In the beginning, when I had my first bestseller, the fame felt like a real ego boost. But by the time my third book was released, I had become a recluse. The constant invasion of my privacy grew old very quickly. I annoyed the limo driver when I ordered him to pick up the vagrant's belongings and put them in the trunk because we were going to the hospital to check on her condition. Now, limo drivers are considered the upper echelon of NYC's driving world, and he looked as if he were going to tell me where to stick my request. However, the two $100 bills in my hand changed his mind. Bribery always works in the city. Between the two of us, we made quick work of the cleanup, but the limo driver warned me I would be charged extra to clean his trunk once all this mess was removed. Typical of New York City. During the ride to the hospital, I sat back in my seat and thought back to the past. It had been 10 years since my divorce. The Cliff Notes version is simple. She was up to a quart of vodka a day. I told her to quit drinking and get help or else, but she chose the or else option. The lawyers made quick work of our joint bank accounts. It was the second marriage for both of us, and we both had adult children from our previous marriages. She had 2 married daughters. Her older daughter and husband were pretentious snobs that I couldn't stand. Her other daughter, Jackie, was the victim of hard luck. Her biological father favored the older sister and treated Jackie as an afterthought. Jackie was a good kid, but she was ignored by both her parents. When I married her mother, Jackie and I hit it off. I was the first adult in her family to treat her like a person instead of an afterthought. We became close, but despite my objections, Jackie married right out of high school and soon had 3 kids. I was never sure who caused the fights, but Jackie began to look like a punching bag once or twice a month. She kept saying she fell down, slipped on the ice, or walked into a door. You know, she had all the excuses. Her mother wouldn't let me get involved, no matter how badly I wanted to. Eventually, Jackie also started to drink. Well, one thing led to another, and soon Jackie was divorced and in a treatment facility for her drinking. It took a couple of stays in treatment centers and about 2 years of AA meetings, but she finally overcame her drinking problem. I paid a few of my old friends some money, and they paid Jackie's ex-husband a visit. I understand he'll never walk again. Jackie met her second husband while attending her AA meetings, and they married a few years later. He was a really nice guy, but 2 weeks before their first anniversary, he had a massive heart attack and was dead before reaching the hospital. Now you see what I mean when I say Jackie had some very hard luck. Anyway, I digress. My ex's older daughter and her husband supported my ex-wife during her divorce action. They hired a very expensive, high-profile divorce lawyer. Their lawyer struck first and filed all sorts of motions. I hired a shark. He was a really nasty son of a gun. To make a long story short, my side offered my soon-to-be ex a 50-50 split, but they refused and demanded a 70-30th split. My lawyer smiled and said to them, "You don't have grounds for a divorce. We won't grant one. Let's go to trial." I almost panicked. If I lost, a judge would decide the split. If I won, I got to keep my wife. Talk about a lose-lose situation. You'll love this next part. We were in court to give our statements under oath before the second day of testimony. My lawyer dropped a thick legal petition on their table, announcing to her lawyer that as soon as he won the next day, he would file this motion, handing them a copy. I could see my wife read the title, Motion for Involuntary Commitment of an Adult. I had threatened to have her committed for her drinking problems during an earlier argument. As she read the title, a very scared look came across her face. They settled that afternoon for a 30-70th split in my favor, and the judge granted the divorce. That was the last time I saw my wife, until now. I was brought back to the present by my driver opening the door of the limo. I heard a security guard yelling at my driver, "Sir, you can't park there." Typical of NYC. The driver paid no attention to the guard as he helped me out of the back seat. The guard got in the driver's face, yelling about towing and having the driver fired. My driver asked the guard, "Do you carry a gun?" "Well, I do, so back off before I beat you with it." The guard retreated back into the hospital. I guess my original $200 tip was paying dividends. I walked up to the admitting station in the ER. The clerk started asking me questions, beginning with a belligerent tone. "What do you mean you don't know about her health insurance? How do we get paid?" And on and on. I noticed my latest book face up on her desk. I reached across the desk and flipped the book over so that my picture on the dust jacket was visible. She paused and started comparing the picture to my face. "You're really him, Mr. Pfizer's," she said, and I nodded. She agreed to let me cover the costs by sending a bill to my publisher. Boy, they were going to be surprised when that bill showed up. I autographed her book for her and went off to find the doctor. As I mentioned before, bribery always works in the city. The doctor explained that my ex-wife had hit her head on the curb when the cab knocked her down, resulting in her coma. There appeared to be no real brain damage, but until she came out of the coma, there was no absolute certainty. "That's the good news," he said. "Do you know that she's probably struggling with alcohol dependency?" I did. That was the reason I divorced her. I wanted her to get help, but she didn't. "Her liver appears to be damaged from all the drinking," he added. "It looks as if she's been drinking heavily for about 2 to 3 years. "No, doctor, it's been at least 5 years since I divorced her because of her drinking. So she's been at it for at least 6 years, but probably a lot longer." "Well, that makes it even harder. I'm not sure her body can handle the stress of detoxification, but we can't start trying until she comes out of the coma," the doctor continued. "Any more good news?" I asked sarcastically. "Yes, I'm sorry to say there is. We found an area on her left foot that is affected by a staph infection. We might need to amputate part of her foot." I was given some paperwork to sign that allowed them to take the necessary steps to save her. Hell, I thought I loved her once. Maybe this would help her. The doctor walked me down the hall to her room. There lay the woman I had spent 15 years of my life with. She was hooked up to a variety of monitors, and one of the orderlies was trying to wash her feet. He did not look like he was enjoying this assignment. I could smell her body odor the moment I walked in. I scarcely recognized my ex. Her soft brown hair was completely gone. The doctor saw me looking. When a patient has a serious case of lice, they shave their head and then bathe the person in an insecticide. In your ex-wife's case, they need to wash her 2 or 3 times a day until the lice are all gone. I looked at her. She appeared to weigh well over 200 pounds. At least she's been eating regularly, I thought. No, that's all fluid buildup. We suspect that her kidneys are failing, but the test results are not back yet. At this point in his explanation, the smell of urine overpowered the body odor in the room. The doctor turned to the orderly and said, "Get her cleaned up and the bed changed. I'll order a catheter." The doctor and I left the room. He went to the nurse's station, and I headed to the elevators and my waiting car. The sour smell lingered in my nose as we drove away. I had no plans to return to that room ever. I had divorced her, and there was no point in bringing up old memories. I did save the pictures and a few other personal things for her. They were put in her room. The rest was just glorified garbage and got tossed. My next 2 weeks in the city were hectic. I spent every afternoon and part of each evening sitting on a folding chair at a table, autographing my book for fans. Actually, if it wasn't for the fact that my butt kept falling asleep, I enjoyed meeting my readers. Their brief conversations kept me humble. After all, New Yorkers have a habit of telling it like it is. The mornings were reserved for TV talk shows and meetings with my publisher or agent. Somehow, the news shows picked up on the cab accident, and my ex-wife became the subject of many questions. I suspected it was my publicist just doing her job. The story unfolded and was spun so that I looked like a lonely ex-husband caring for his addicted ex-wife. I had a very good publicist, that's why I suspected her. If they only knew, I thought. I hadn't stopped smiling since the judge signed my divorce decree. Only someone who had lived with an alcoholic can understand the pain of watching a loved one sink into the darkness brought by addiction. My publisher was ecstatic. Book sales were climbing because of all this free publicity. I was being portrayed as a genuinely nice guy caring for his ex-wife in her time of need, who had also been an author in another time and place. My book tour completed on an upbeat note. I had a contract for a 5-book deal, and 2 of my previous books had movie deals. My publicist twisted my arm and made me pay one more visit to the hospital. At the hospital, when they led me to my ex-wife's floor, I was greeted by a couple of TV cameras, a bunch of print reporters, and some very irritated nurses. I held an improvised press conference outside her room. There were even some staged photos of me holding my ex's hand and kissing her forehead. "Suit up," my publicist whispered in my ear. "If I knew you were going to be such a ham, I'd have brought an onion so you could have cried too." Then she pinched me so I couldn't laugh and spoil the effect for the news crews. That afternoon, I flew back to my home in Honolulu, my ex-wife soon forgotten. A couple of months passed since my NYC book tour, and I was well on my way to creating another blockbuster, or at least I hoped so, when my phone rang. I had been taking a break, sitting on my deck to gather my thoughts. The temperature was in the high 70s, with a gentle breeze blowing across the ocean from the west, typical Hawaii weather. My caller ID flashed an NYC number that I didn't recognize. "Hello, Minden Fisher speaking," I answered, opting not to use my real name. "We'd like to get a statement on your feelings now that your ex-wife has come out of her coma," said a brusque voice on the other end. The news reporters had found me. I remembered my ex and softened my tone. "You mean my ex-wife has recovered from her coma?" No one informed me. I mumbled to myself, trying to figure out how to handle this. "I'm going to hang up now and call her doctor." "I need to know her condition," I replied. I called my publicist, Sue, to formulate a plan of action. We agreed it would help my image if I appeared to support my ex-wife in her recovery, anything to boost book sales. I called the NYC hospital and spoke to my ex's doctor. "Your ex-wife has come out of her coma and is responding well to treatment. Her liver and kidneys are recovering from years of abuse. Her mind shows no signs of damage from her interaction with the curb, but it does show signs of damage from her long association with alcohol," he explained. His next question surprised me. "Where do you want us to send her for her next round of treatments? We don't do alcoholic recovery here." "How long do I have to find a place?" "We'd like the bed free by early next week." "I'll let you know where to send her," I said and hung up, passing the mess to my publicist. After all, this whole fiasco was her idea. I'll say one thing, Sue did a fantastic job. The next day's news shows reported, "Author's ex-wife recovers." Of course, I had no clue what was going on, so I called NYC again. Sue explained everything to me. Mary, my ex-wife, was scheduled for treatment at a private rehab clinic in California for an initial 60-day stay, after which she would be reevaluated. The bad news? It would cost me at least $120,000 for the first 60 days. "There goes the royalty for my next book," I lamented, but I told Sue to start the process. "Minden, Mary doesn't even remember who you are. The drinking has affected her mind. She doesn't remember her daughters," Sue concluded sadly. "Katie and Jackie, I hadn't thought of them in years." I had to explain that I was Mary's second husband. She married right out of high school and had 2 children by the age of 20. By 40, she was a single parent with 1 child still living with her and 1 in college. I came into the picture when the younger girl, Jackie, was finishing high school. Later in her marriage, the older one was in the process of carrying on an affair with a coworker behind her husband's back. I got along well with the younger daughter. She was a pretty blonde with a great personality, though school wasn't her strong suit. After Mary and I divorced, Katie and her second husband paid all of Mary's costs up front. Jackie called to say she'd always remember me, but that her mother was her priority, which ended my relationship with my stepdaughters. Back to the new book business at hand, I gave a few phone interviews and then flew to LA for TV appearances. I was still being portrayed as the good guy in this ex-wife matter, and it positively affected my book sales, so much so that I was scheduled for another book tour by my publisher. I found myself signing books by day and trying to write at night in small motel rooms. If you're ever offered the chance to be on a book tour, refuse. You wake up in one city and go to bed in another, fueled by gallons of coffee, fast food, and rude people with no rest. After about 2 weeks, you don't even remember what city you're in without checking the schedule. It's a sad comment on our society, but all the stores and malls look the same. Maybe the plants are different, or the Starbucks kiosk is in a different walkway, but all in all, if you've seen one mall, you've seen them all. So here I was, in front of a Barnes & Noble bookstore signing books and forcing a smile when I spotted a familiar face in line, my former stepdaughter, Jackie. I looked at my schedule and realized I was in my old hometown. I took one of my cards and handed it to an assistant, saying, "See that blonde in the red coat about 20 people back in line?" "Yes, sir." "Hand her this card and say your stepfather would like you to call him on his cell phone. He'd like to meet for coffee. She won't recognize the name on this card otherwise." I watched as my assistant handed her the card and delivered my message. Jackie looked at him as if he was crazy, then turned to the front of the line where I was sitting. Her expression shifted from curiosity to amazement, and tears filled her eyes. Clutching the card to her chest, she stepped out of line and nodded when she saw me looking. "She's a little young for you, Sue," my publicist commented. "Jackie's Mary's daughter," I replied, realizing the connection. I could almost see the light bulb going off in Sue's head as she contemplated our next move. A few hours later, my entourage and I were seated in a franchise Italian restaurant, waiting for Jackie to arrive. I chose a corner table facing the wall to avoid interruptions from fans. I had experienced perfect strangers pulling up a chair to discuss my latest book as if it were a true story, which could be quite intrusive. Our waitress informed me that the rest of my party had arrived, but that there were too many to fit at our table. Soon after, we were escorted into a small private dining room. I was immediately embraced by my stepdaughter and her children. My youngest granddaughter, with her exuberant energy, squeezed me tightly, followed quickly by her older brother. Finally, Jackie stood before me, tears in her eyes, a handkerchief in her grasp. She wrapped herself around me, and I held her tightly, feeling her body shake with sobs as she buried her face in my shoulder. "Hi honey, I've missed you," I whispered. "Your family looks wonderful. Please, call me Minden. I'll explain everything later." "I don't care what you want us to call you," she replied, "just don't ever leave us again. You're the only parent I have now." I was taken aback. "No, I'm not. I found your mother. She's in a difficult situation in New York City." We took our places at the table and began a long overdue family reunion. Jackie's kids shared stories of their lives. Her eldest son, Brian, was the assistant restaurant manager in training. Her daughter was living with a friend while attending junior college. Jackie lived in a small house in the city, working split shifts as a waitress to make ends meet. As we caught up, I shared my journey over the past decade, from my move to Honolulu to my rise as a published author. I also wanted to understand more about Mary, my ex-wife, and how she had ended up in her current situation. Jackie explained that her sister, Katie, and her husband had placed Mary in an adult care facility, taking control of her assets. At just over 40, Mary looked much older due to her heavy drinking. 2 years later, Jackie found out during a visit that Mary hadn't been seen for over a month. The police could only offer limited help since Mary was an adult and considered capable of making her own decisions. I shared what I had witnessed when I found Mary in New York City, her struggles with alcoholism, the damage to her liver and kidneys, and her recent coma. The mood at the table shifted as my family listened intently. I explained the treatments Mary was undergoing and the doctor's optimistic outlook regarding her recovery, although visits weren't permitted for a few months. As we were wrapping up, I took Jackie aside. "I need a personal assistant for my tour and the next book. I'll double your waitressing salary." She hesitated, considering the offer. "I can cover your travel expenses to visit your kids or fly them out to see you. Please accept. I don't want to lose you again." With tears in her eyes, she accepted, then rushed to share her exciting news with her family. The next 2 weeks flew by. I was busy with what felt like an endless book tour, while Jackie prepared for her new role, quitting her job, packing her apartment, and updating her contacts. I only dealt with sore hands from signing books, which was a good problem to have. When Jackie was ready, I had tickets reserved for her to join me on the tour. I learned her kids weren't taking her to the airport because they all had prior commitments. I changed Jackie's flight and chartered a night flight that allowed her kids to come to the airport to say goodbye. I even arranged for a limo to pick them all up and take them to the airport, then back home. I later found out it was a tearful farewell. Jackie is one of those people that everybody likes. She's cheerful, enthusiastic, and has a way of making everyone feel like they've known her forever. Those qualities captivated the flight crew and helped her make new friends. When I arrived at the airport to pick her up, I found her in the crew lounge, enjoying coffee and snacks with her new friends. Someone on the crew recognized me. "Mr. Fishers, may we offer you some coffee?" "Don't call my dad mister, it's Minden to you guys," Jackie scolded playfully. I smiled and nodded but declined their offer, explaining that we had a long drive and a busy day ahead of us. They helped carry Jackie's luggage out to the rental car. After a hectic book tour, I was exhausted and couldn't wait to get home and climb into my own bed. While the beds in various hotels were comfortable, nothing beats the feeling of sleeping in your own space. Once we landed in Honolulu, I had Jackie walk out of the terminal and grab a taxi with enough room for all our luggage while I retrieved our bags from the carousel. I enlisted the help of a skycap, and together we loaded all the luggage onto a cart. When Jackie joined us, she guided the skycap and me to our ride. The driver was taken aback by the amount of baggage and mentioned that it would be about 10 minutes before a larger van arrived to carry everything. I tipped the skycap $50 to guard our bags until the van arrived. We got in the taxi and started our journey home. My house is in a gated community on a hillside overlooking Honolulu. When I first moved to the island, I considered buying something oceanfront, but the prices were astronomical. Instead, I opted for a hillside property, which turned out to be a good decision. As we drove up the hill, Jackie was impressed by the island's beauty, and she chatted excitedly the entire way. Upon entering the gates, she fell silent, taking in the sight of my house, which was the nicest one on the hillside. My housekeeper, Iolani, was waiting at the door to greet us, and I introduced her to Jackie. They quickly struck up a conversation while I waited with one of the gardeners for the luggage. When the luggage van arrived, Iolani and Jackie reappeared as if by some telepathic connection. They had chosen a bedroom and bath suite for Jackie on the opposite end of the house, away from mine. Her suite was in the same wing as the guest bedrooms, while my master bedroom was alone, offering a view of the city and the ocean. After Iolani and Jackie took care of the luggage, I unpacked quickly. Most of my clothes went straight into the laundry, only my shoes and belts were clean. I took a refreshing shower and changed into a t-shirt and shorts. Home felt wonderful. At lunch, Iolani said, "We're off now because Jackie doesn't have any clothes suitable for the Hawaiian climate. We're heading to Ala Moana Mall, so be ready with your credit card." I complied, knowing I was in for some serious shopping. I spent the afternoon transferring my latest writing from my laptop to my home network and backing everything up. I also caught up on emails. It was almost dark when the women returned. Surprisingly, they only had a couple of shopping bags between them. I was happy until Iolani informed me that the truck would be delivering the rest of the purchases the next morning. After Iolani quickly left to tend to her own family, Jackie and I drove down the mountain into the city for dinner. We decided on Italian and went to Annie Pasta's, enjoying a cozy family-style meal. The next day, we started our routine. By 8 a.m., we were both up and dressed, and the coffee Iolani had prepared the night before was ready. Iolani arrived at 8:30 to start breakfast, and Jackie and I discussed our plans for the day. After breakfast, I locked myself in my office, where I aim to write for at least 3 to 4 hours each day without interruption. Jackie set up her own little office, where she signed on to answer emails and make arrangements as needed. She also took charge of the phone. This arrangement worked well for us, as Jackie was quite capable and resolved 95% of her tasks without needing my help. The only tasks I really had to focus on were the corrections requested by my editor. If I could have figured out a way to delegate that, I would have, allowing me to devote more time to writing. I enjoyed writing, but not the corrections. Sometimes, my timelines got a little confusing. After all, having some characters with children before they were born might confuse readers. About a month later, my comfortable routine was interrupted by Jackie knocking on my door. "There's a doctor on the phone. He wants to talk to you about Mom." Her voice sounded scared. I took the call, fearing the worst. "Mary's treatment is progressing." "How soon can you come into my office?" the doctor asked. "I live in Hawaii." "How long before I can get there?" I replied. "You're 4,000 miles away, and I have a book in progress with deadlines to meet. Can't we do this over the phone?" "No," he said. "She's making progress, and I want her to meet you again." "Okay, I'll have my PA set the trip up and get back to you." "Should my PA accompany me?" "Why shouldn't she?" he asked. "Good point. I'll decide whether or not to let them meet after I talk to my daughter." I hung up and planned to walk down the hall to Jackie's office. When I opened the door to my study, I found Jackie sitting on the floor, knees drawn up to her chin, looking like a scared little girl. I dropped down next to her. It wasn't bad news. "She's making progress, and he wants her to see me. Please set up a trip for us," she pleaded. "Of course I wouldn't deprive you of a chance to see your mother. So get started. The sooner you make the arrangements, the sooner we'll be there." With tears in her eyes and a smile on her face, she ran back to her office. At lunch, she asked, "Is tomorrow too soon to leave?" "I've got all the reservations made." "No, honey, I'll have Iolani start packing this afternoon." Her face lit up like a 1,000-watt light bulb. We caught an 8 a.m. flight to the mainland the next morning. After landing in LA, I arranged to have our luggage delivered to our hotel and grabbed a rental car. Jackie and I set off on the long drive north to the clinic. As we approached the sanatorium, Jackie grew quieter. When she saw the wall and the gate, she began to cry softly. The doctor met us at the entrance, casually dressed in jeans and a golf shirt. As I looked around, I noticed that everyone else was also dressed casually, but only some wore electronic badges. My guess was that only the staff had them. During the introductions, the doctor handed us visitor badges and said, "Hello, I'm Bill Kelly. Please join me in my office to discuss Mary's progress and further treatment." Jackie was openly crying by now. "Jackie, you can stop crying now. I'm not going to give you any bad news. Your mom is doing well considering how much she abused her body. Health-wise, she's doing as well as can be expected. We estimate she has been an alcoholic for most of her adult life. The woman you both knew is not who she actually is. Her personality was affected by her drinking." He continued, "Physically, her body has healed as much as can be expected. Both her liver and kidneys are functioning at a reduced level, but if she stays away from alcohol, she can have a normal life. We've gotten her weight to near normal. Mentally, however, that's another question, and that's why we are here today. She's showing reduced brain function. The old saying about drinking killing brain cells applies to her. We have her functioning as an adult. She can feed herself, dress herself, and complete basic functions, but she has no memory of past events. As far as she's concerned, her life started one morning when she woke up here." Jackie reached over and took my hand, squeezing it a little too hard for my comfort. The doctor noticed but continued speaking. "We found 2 framed photos among the items sent to us from New York. One is a photo of you and Mary at a formal event, and the second is of you, Jackie, and 2 small children. We put both pictures on the desk in Mary's room, but she ignored them until about 2 weeks ago. On that day, we found her sitting in her chair, holding both pictures and rocking back and forth. I talked to her about the pictures, and all I got from her was that they must be important, but she couldn't remember why. That's why I called you. We need to see if we can jog her memory, and that's where you two come in. We spent the next hour discussing strategy and what Mary's possible reactions might be. At one point, all the coffee I had drunk wanted out, and Bill joined me as we stood. Okay, Minden, what's the problem? I can see you're not thrilled. I hate her, Bill. I would have been perfectly happy to never see her again. You see, my publicist in New York promoted this whole situation to boost book sales. The only good thing that has come from all this is that I have Jackie living with me and working for me. I guess we have a problem then, don't we? He said and walked over to the sink. Can you pretend for a little while longer? He asked. I don't see any other choice, I replied. Thanks. I'll work out an exit strategy for you when the time appears right. It was back to his office for another round of discussions. We broke for lunch at noon. While sitting in a cafeteria shared by the staff and patients, I noticed a very frail little old lady heading my way. She wore a simple dress and flat shoes, her hair short and completely white. Another fan? I thought, but as she got closer, she began to look familiar. Excuse me, but do I know you? I asked. They tell me my name is Mary, she replied. Just then, I heard silverware hit the floor and then Jackie's voice. Mom, is that really you? Jackie lost all control, grabbing her mother and breaking down in tears. Poor Mary just stood there, seemingly confused but enjoying the attention. Bill injected himself into the reunion and led us back to his office. Mary and Jackie never let go of each other's hands for the rest of the afternoon. I stayed quiet in the back of Bill's office, trying to be invisible. When Mary began showing signs of confusion, Bill suggested she return to her room to rest. Mary still wouldn't let go of Jackie's hand, so we all walked to her room together. In Mary's room, I noticed a small writing desk with Jackie's picture on it and wondered where mine was. I spotted it on her bedside table, tilted so she could see it from her bed. As Jackie helped her climb in, Mary said the picture made her happy but didn't know why. An allergy I didn't know I had kicked in, and my eyes started watering. Bill glanced at me. I just said, "It's something in my eyes." He smiled in understanding. In case you're curious why she didn't recognize me, the picture was taken 20 years ago at a benefit dinner for a children's charity. Today, I'm a few pounds heavier, my hair is a lot shorter, and I had LASIK eye surgery, so I no longer need glasses. Oh yeah, my hair is also very white now, so I guess I do look a little different. That night in my motel room, I had difficulty falling asleep. My mind kept wandering back to the good times I had with Mary when we first got married. Everything was perfect. We lived in a 2-bedroom townhouse, and during that time, we shared a lot of intimate moments together. Then we bought an old farmhouse. It was only a couple of acres, but it had a carriage barn, a detached 3-car garage, and a large 2-story farmhouse built in 1866. We tried to enjoy every aspect of our new home, which led to us sneaking out into the yard on occasion. Those first years were wonderful. But then I started to notice her drinking. At first, it was just an extra glass of wine with dinner, but soon it became a before-dinner cocktail, then an after-dinner drink. Eventually, she would sit in one room watching TV while I worked on my writing in another. I often found myself sleeping alone in her bed. As the years passed, her interest in our relationship waned, and I felt like I was supporting her habit while getting nothing in return. Please understand, she was the one who turned off our loving times. She was no longer interested in us, just in her bottle. That was how the last 10 years of my marriage went. My accountant warned me to start planning for what was likely to happen, so I set up hidden accounts for any extra income. I moved a lot of my finances offshore and invested in a car wash with a friend who needed a diversion from his wayward wife. Car washes are great businesses, mostly cash and no receipts. A lot of that income went south into my offshore accounts. After my partner died, his cheating widow had to sell the business. Actually, that wasn't so bad because it resulted in another large cash transfer for me. I managed the sale, and she ended up getting 50% of the book value plus another 50% under the table. If she hadn't been so difficult to deal with, I might have made it a fair sale, but her long-term boyfriend was coaching her on how to handle things. He ended up screwing her out of about $250,000 and then disappeared. My next venture was in food service, another all-cash business. I managed to hide about $25,000 a year from something I did only on weekends and a few holidays. Plus, during the auctions, both the buyers and staff had to eat, so I had a captive audience for my business. Eventually, the company I worked for was bought by a larger firm. I was offered early retirement with a nice bonus. I took the money and ran. The only problem was that now I was home 24/7 with my wife, the drinker. When I was out working 6 or 7 days a week, I could put up with her drinking, out of sight, out of mind. You see, my publicist in New York promoted this whole thing to boost book sales. The only good thing that has resulted from all this is that I have Jackie living with and working for me. I guess we have a problem then, don't we? He said, walking over to the sink. Can you pretend for a little while longer? He asked. I didn't see any other choice, so I replied, thanks. I'll work out an exit strategy for you when the time appears right. It was back to his office for another round of discussions. We broke for lunch at noon and found ourselves in a cafeteria shared by the staff and patients. I noticed a very frail little old lady heading my way, wearing a plain house dress and flat shoes, her short hair completely white. Another fan? I thought. As she got closer, she started to look familiar. Excuse me, but do I know you? I asked. They tell me my name is Mary. I heard the sound of silverware hitting the floor and then Jackie's voice, Mom, is that really you? Jackie lost all control, grabbing her mother and breaking down in tears. Poor Mary stood there, seemingly confused but enjoying the attention. Bill injected himself into the reunion, walking us all back to his office. Mary and Jackie never let go of each other's hands for the rest of the afternoon. I stayed out of the conversations, trying to be invisible at the back of Bill's office. When Mary began to show signs of greater confusion, Bill suggested she return to her room to rest. Mary wouldn't let go of Jackie's hand, so we all walked to her room together. Inside, I noticed a small writing desk with Jackie's picture on it and wondered where mine was. I spotted it on the bedside table, tilted so Mary could see it from her bed. As Jackie helped her climb in, Mary told her that the picture made her happy, though she didn't know why. An allergy I didn't know I had kicked in, and my eyes started watering. Just something in my eyes, I said, and Bill smiled. In case you're curious why Mary didn't recognize me, the picture was taken 20 years ago at a benefit dinner for a children's charity. Today, I was a few pounds heavier, my hair was shorter, and after having LASIK eye surgery, I no longer needed glasses. Oh, and my hair was also very white now, so I guess I did look a little different. That night in my motel room, I had difficulty falling asleep. My mind wandered back to the good times I had with Mary when we first got married. Everything was perfect. We lived in a 2-bedroom townhouse where we shared countless intimate moments. Later, we bought the old farmhouse, which had a carriage barn, a detached 3-car garage, and a large 2-story farmhouse built in 1866. Mary and I tried to fill every room with love, leading to sneaking outside into the yard. Those first years were the best, but then I noticed her drinking. At first, it was an extra glass of wine with dinner, then cocktails before and after meals. Eventually, I was sleeping in our bed alone. All the affectionate moments stopped, and in a reversal of the usual story, I was the one left unfulfilled while she turned to her bottle. I began to notice that the last decade of my marriage was spent avoiding each other. My accountant advised me to start planning for the inevitable, so I set up hidden accounts for any extra income, moving a lot of my finances offshore. I bought into a car wash with a friend, which provided cash without receipts. When my partner died, his unfaithful widow sold her share, giving me a significant cash transfer. Next, I ventured into food service, another all-cash business that helped me hide about $25,000 a year. My offshore accounts were growing nicely. When the company I worked for was bought by a larger firm, I was offered early retirement with a nice bonus, which I took. But that meant I was now home 24/7 with my wife, the drunk. When I was working 6 or 7 days a week, I could handle her drinking, out of sight, out of mind, but now things had to change. I started putting pressure on her to stop drinking, but that backfired, and I was served divorce papers. To keep it simple, I won, and I've been walking around with a smile on my face for the last 10 years. To make things even better, my book started selling, and soon I was a multimillionaire. It wasn't like winning the lottery because I still had to work for it, but it felt pretty great. Now here I was, facing my ex-wife again, and I thought about just walking away, but I'd probably lose Jackie and her kids. I like being back in their lives. I knew that if I abandoned Mary, word would get out, and my book sales would drop, forcing me to stay the course. On the bright side, as long as she was 4,000 miles away, I could put up with her. But fate was not on my side. We stayed at the sanatorium for almost 2 weeks before I could create an excuse to leave. While I hated deadlines, this time I used them to my advantage and returned to Hawaii to finish my book. During our time at the clinic, Jackie did everything she could to help her mother recover her memories, while I stayed in the background, keeping my mouth shut. Bill kept giving me dirty looks but never said anything. It took about another month to finish my book and get it approved by the publisher. Of course, I had to go on the pre-release book tour, and Jackie was still at the clinic. The first couple of appearances went smoothly until someone asked about my wife. One little old lady in the back stood up and asked, "How's your wife doing?" That question opened the floodgates, and I was bombarded with inquiries about Mary's progress for weeks. My publicist coached me on my responses, even how to make my voice break as if I were trying not to cry. The first printing of my newest book sold out in just over 3 weeks, and my older books went into another round of printings. I was making money hand over fist and felt happier returning from the tour than I ever had before. But fate struck again when I arrived home, greeted by Iolani, Jackie, and Mary at the front door. After hugs, Jackie said, "Dr. Bill suggested Mom move here with us. He feels that a normal home environment will help her recover." I thought, I'm going to get that guy. I told her she was always welcome. I watched as she followed Jackie around like a lost puppy for the next week. My heart broke because the strong, willful beauty I once fell in love with was now a shell of her former self. I missed the old Mary. She was a lot of fun and brought joy to my life. I called Dr. Bill to express my frustrations, jokingly suggesting I hire a hitman in California. He laughed and explained why he thought Mary could be helped by staying with us. By the end of our conversation, I found myself agreeing to his plan. My job was to bond with Mary and help her regain her confidence, which is how I ended up with another shadow. It all started when Jackie and Iolani went to the mall together, leaving Mary in my care without telling me. I was hard at work in my office when I needed a bathroom break. I opened the door to find poor Mary sitting on the floor next to my door, trembling in fright. I sat down beside her and asked, "Why are you so scared?" "Because I thought I was alone again." "I don't want to ever be alone again." "You're not alone." "I'm here, you just needed to knock," I replied. "But Jackie told me not to bother you if the door was closed." I began to understand how far she still had to go, and it was going to be a long journey. I helped her to her feet and gave her a reassuring hug, explaining that I was going to the bathroom and would be right back. When I finished, I found her sitting on the floor outside the bathroom again. I walked her back to my office, and that's how the rest of the week went. Wherever I went, Mary followed. One afternoon, she asked, "Why do I want to call you Jack?" "It doesn't feel right." Distracted by my writing, I absent-mindedly answered, "Because that's my real name. You used it when we were married." I heard a sob and saw her run out the office door before I could stop her. I enlisted everyone's help to find her, and Iolani eventually found her huddled in a closet, repeating, "If I loved him, why don't I remember him?" They helped her up and settled her in bed, with someone staying with her until bedtime. Iolani went home, and soon after, Jackie joined her mother in bed. The next morning, I called Dr. Bill to update him, but all I received was criticism for my actions. He suggested that I might have undone 6 months of progress, and when he calmed down, he offered me some guidance. I felt guilty and tried to follow his advice. Whenever I was with Mary, I was to gently touch her, hold her hand, or put my arm around her. If she sat on the couch, I should sit next to her. When she entered a room I was in, I was to greet her with a friendly kiss on the cheek, and if she announced she was leaving, I should hug her and tell her I'd miss her. One night, a particularly nasty thunderstorm rolled in, waking me with a loud clap of thunder. I realized someone was in my room, and the next flash of lightning revealed Mary standing by my bed. In a small voice, she said, "Please hold me, I'm scared." I sat up and opened my arms to her, and that's how I woke up the next morning with her curled up beside me. When Iolani saw Mary leaving my room the next morning, she shot me a disapproving look. "She was scared by the storm last night," I explained. From that night on, Mary slept in my bed, and it felt comforting to have her there. We shared only a simple goodnight kiss, which seemed to calm her. Jackie, however, was a different concern. While she was happy that her mother found comfort with me, she worried that the reasons for our divorce would resurface. Jackie spent a lot of time on the phone with Dr. Bill. One morning, my private line rang. "Minden, this is Bill. What's Jackie's problem?" I explained Mary's new sleeping arrangements and Jackie's withdrawal from me. "If I can't bring her out of her funk, you'll need to send Jackie to me. If she indicates that she wants to see me, don't question her, just buy the ticket." We agreed to touch base again next week to review Mary and Jackie's progress. That night, as we lay in bed, Mary took a bold step. "I remember we got divorced, but not the reason. Why don't you have another woman in your life?" I answered truthfully, "Because I haven't found anyone who could measure up to you." She turned to face me, wrapped her arms around my neck, and kissed me. This kiss felt deeper than friendship. "I'm not sure, but I think I love you too," she replied. That night, we slept face to face for the first time, her smile softening the moment. As the months passed, Mary began to regain her confidence, walking with her head held high and even gaining some weight from Iolani's cooking. I had a small exercise room set up in the lower level of my house, and soon Mary started joining me. At first, she only watched, but then she began to walk on the treadmill. I showed her how to use the machine, and though she only managed 5 minutes at first, we worked on her endurance together. At night, I would help massage her sore leg and back muscles through her nightgown, and each night, I placed a gentle kiss on the back of her neck as a signal that I was done. One night, Mary asked, "When I start exercising my upper body, will you massage that too?" "If you'd like, Mary, I'd be happy to." She started using the Cybex equipment in my gym, and though it was challenging at first, her determination showed as she made progress. Soon, she was exercising for an hour alongside me, proud of her accomplishments. One morning, I awoke to find her curled up against me again. I tried to get up without waking her, but when I heard her say, "Good morning, husband," I realized I had failed. After my bathroom routine, I returned to bed. "When did you remember we were once married?" I asked. "I didn't remember, it just feels right when I'm in your arms," she said. From then on, her recovery accelerated. One day, Jackie found Mary crying, and they shared a heartfelt moment together. That night, as Mary prepared for bed, her memories returned. We made love for much of the night, and the next morning, we missed breakfast. Nearly a month later, Mary woke me from a deep sleep, crying, "Please forgive me for driving you away. I'll never drink again." She had finally recalled the reasons behind our divorce, and we shared a good cry together, promising to love and cherish each other forever. I had the love of my life back, and she was regaining her memories. As Mary returned to me, my feelings of vengeance toward her self-centered eldest daughter and her husband resurfaced. I reached out to childhood friends, and about 6 months later, I learned that the older daughter and her husband had died in a car accident due to brake failure. I chose not to tell Mary or Jackie about their deaths. Almost 3 years later, I noticed that Mary was experiencing pain. She often held her stomach. The doctors confirmed my fears. Her liver was failing. The years of alcohol abuse had finally taken their toll. I pulled every string I could to get her on a transplant list, but the doctor explained that she wouldn't live long enough to reach the top. She had less than a year to live. Mary's brain never fully recovered, having lost too many brain cells to her drinking. When someone asked her a question, there was often a noticeable pause before she responded. There were times when she would look at me and say, "There's something I feel I should remember, but I can't," followed by tears or frustration. I would hold her, trying to ease her pain. At times, I attempted to reconnect intimately with her. While she never outright refused me, she also didn't actively participate. Most nights, I simply held her, reminiscing about our earlier and more joyful years, struggling to find comfort in sleep. One night, as we cuddled in bed, I heard her soft voice praying, "Thank you, God, for letting me have Jack back. When I die, can I wait for him to join me?" She passed away quietly in her sleep a few weeks later. As time often does, it moved on, and Jack, now 93, found himself in the hospital surrounded by family, watching as he began to fade. Suddenly, he sat up and, in a clear voice, said, "Hi, Mary, my love. I'm coming." As he fell back, the monitors ceased their beeping. Dear listeners, please share your thoughts in the comment section below, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.